The woman stumbled off the afternoon train in Oro Grande, New Mexico, her dress torn at the hem and her dark hair tangled with desert dust. And when the station master asked her name, she stared at him with eyes as empty as the vast sky overhead. Preston Ashford had come to town for supplies, his weathered hands gripping a list his housekeeper had written in careful script, when he saw the commotion at the depot. A small crowd had gathered around the young woman who stood swaying on the platform, her face pale beneath the grime of travel. She wore a dress that had once been fine, blue silk now stained and rumpled, and her hands trembled as she touched her temples. "Miss, can you tell us where you are from?" The station master, a portly man named Henderson, spoke loudly as if volume might penetrate whatever fog surrounded her mind. The woman opened her mouth, closed it, then shook her head slowly. Her eyes, a startling shade of green that reminded Preston of spring grass after rain, filled with tears that she blinked back with visible effort. "I do not know," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "I cannot remember anything." Preston watched as Henderson exchanged glances with Doc Brennan, who had been summoned from his office down the street. The physician, a thin man with spectacles perched on his narrow nose, examined the woman gently, checking her pupils and asking her questions she could not answer. "No identification?" Doc Brennan asked Henderson. "Nothing. No ticket stub, no papers, no luggage. The conductor said she was already on the train when he started his shift in Albuquerque. Thought she had boarded at Santa Fe, but nobody there remembers selling her a ticket." The woman swayed again, and Preston moved forward instinctively, catching her elbow before she could fall. She looked up at him, those green eyes meeting his blue ones, and something shifted in his chest like the movement of a fault line deep underground. "Easy now," he said softly. "You are safe." "What will we do with her?" Henderson asked, looking around helplessly. "She cannot just stand here on the platform." "Mrs. Chen at the boarding house might take her in," someone suggested. "Mrs. Chen is full up with minors," another voice countered. Preston found himself speaking before he had fully formed the thought. "She can come to my ranch. My housekeeper, Maria, can look after her until we sort this out." Doc Brennan nodded approvingly. "That might be best. She needs rest and care." The memory loss could be temporary, caused by trauma or illness. Time and familiar surroundings might bring it back. The woman looked at Preston with an expression that mingled hope and fear. "I do not want to impose on a stranger." "We are all strangers to you right now," Preston said gently. "But you need somewhere to stay, and I have room. My ranch is about 5 miles outside town. It is quiet there, peaceful. Maybe that will help." She nodded slowly, having little choice. Preston retrieved his wagon from where he had left it outside the general store, loaded the supplies he had purchased, and helped the woman up onto the bench seat. She moved carefully, as if her body ached, though she made no complaint. The ride to the ranch took them through scrubland dotted with juniper and pinyon pine, the mountains rising in the distance like ancient sentinels. The afternoon sun beat down fierce and hot, and Preston offered the woman his canteen. She drank gratefully. "We need to call you something," Preston said as the wagon rattled along the rutted road. "Until your memory returns." She considered this, looking out at the landscape with those remarkable eyes. "What would you suggest?" Preston thought for a moment. There was something about her that reminded him of sunset, of the last light before darkness, beautiful and fleeting. "Zara," he said finally. "It means blooming flower, seems fitting for someone starting fresh." A small smile touched her lips, the first he had seen. "Zara, yes, I like that." "Zara Vale," Preston added. "Everyone will ask for a full name." "Vale," she repeated, testing the sound. "Zara Vale. It sounds like someone else, but I suppose that is what I am now, someone else." The ranch came into view as they crested a small rise. The main house was built of adobe with a red tile roof, surrounded by cottonwood trees that provided shade. Corrals held horses, and Preston could see his ranch hands working in the distance with the cattle. It was a prosperous spread, the result of 15 years of hard work since Preston had arrived in New Mexico as a young man of 20 with nothing but ambition and determination. Maria Gonzalez, his housekeeper, came out of the house when she heard the wagon. She was a woman in her 50s with silver threading through her black hair and kind eyes that had seen much in her life. Preston explained the situation in Spanish, which he spoke fluently after his years in the territory, and Maria immediately took charge. "The poor child," Maria said, switching to English as she helped Zara down from the wagon. "You come with me. First a bath, then food, then rest. Everything will seem better after that." Zara allowed herself to be led inside while Preston tended to the horses. By the time he came in for supper, she had been transformed. Clean and dressed in one of Maria's simpler dresses, her dark hair braided and pinned up, she sat at the kitchen table looking both better and more lost than before. The grime of travel had hidden her true appearance, and Preston found himself struck by how beautiful she was. She could not have been more than 23 or 24, he estimated, making her about a decade younger than his own 35 years. "Maria has been very kind," Zara said as Preston washed his hands at the basin. "She found me clothes and made me feel welcome." "Maria has a good heart," Preston agreed, sitting down as the housekeeper set bowls of stew before them. "She helped raise me in a manner of speaking when I first came to New Mexico, taught me how to survive in this country." They ate quietly, and Preston found himself studying Zara when he thought she was not looking. She had good manners, he noticed, the kind that spoke of proper upbringing. The way she held her spoon, the way she dabbed her mouth with her napkin, these were habits ingrained deep, deeper than memory loss could erase. "You have been here long?" Zara asked, breaking the silence. 15 years. Came out from Missouri when I was 20. My parents had died the winter before, and there was nothing holding me back east. I wanted land of my own, a place where I could build something that mattered. "And you have," Zara said, looking around at the solid house with its comfortable furnishings. "This is lovely." "It has been a good life," Preston admitted. "Lonely sometimes, but good." Maria made a small sound that might have been agreement or commentary, and Preston shot her a look that made her hide a smile. His housekeeper had been trying to match him with various women in the territory for years, without success. Preston had simply never felt that spark, that connection he believed necessary for marriage. That night, Zara slept in the guest room, and Preston lay awake in his own bed down the hall, wondering what had brought this mysterious woman into his life. The next morning, he rode into town to speak with the sheriff, an older man named Tom Garrett who had kept the peace in Oro Grande for nearly 2 decades. "Might be she is running from something," Sheriff Garrett said, leaning back in his chair. "Might be she hit her head and will remember everything come tomorrow. Hard to say. I will send telegrams to surrounding towns, see if anyone has reported a missing woman matching her description." "She does not seem like a criminal," Preston said. "Pretty woman like that." Sheriff Garrett shook his head. "More likely she is the victim of something. Could be she saw something she should not have. Could be she was attacked. The mind has ways of protecting itself from things too terrible to bear." Preston returned to the ranch troubled by this assessment. He found Zara in the kitchen garden with Maria, helping to pick vegetables. She wore a sunbonnet that shaded her face, and she moved among the plants with careful attention, as if each tomato required serious consideration. "Maria is teaching me which vegetables are ready for harvest," Zara said when she saw him. I do not know if I ever gardened before, but I find it peaceful. Your hands are not calloused, Preston observed, so probably not farm work. Zara looked down at her hands, soft and smooth despite a few new blisters from the morning's labor. No, I suppose not, but I do not want to be useless while I am here. I want to help to earn my keep. You do not need to earn anything, Preston said. You are a guest. I am charity, Zara corrected, but not unkindly. And while I appreciate it more than I can say, I would feel better contributing something. Over the following days, Zara settled into life at the ranch with surprising ease. She helped Maria with cooking and cleaning, learned to feed the chickens and collect eggs, and spent hours in the garden. Preston found himself looking forward to mealtimes, when the three of them would sit together and talk. Zara asked questions about the ranch, about New Mexico, about Preston's life, and he found himself sharing stories he had not thought about in years. "Why did you never marry?" Zara asked one evening as they sat on the porch after supper, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Preston considered the question. Maria had gone to visit her daughter in town, leaving them alone, and there was an intimacy to the twilight that made honesty feel natural. Never found the right woman, I suppose. The rancher's life is hard, especially for a wife. Long hours, isolation, the constant work. I wanted to wait until I met someone who understood that, someone who wanted this life as much as I did. And you never did. No. He looked at her, her profile outlined against the sunset. I began to think maybe I was looking for something that did not exist. Zara was quiet for a moment. I wonder if I was married, if somewhere there is a husband looking for me, wondering where I have gone. The thought sent an unpleasant jolt through Preston's chest. You wear no ring. That does not mean anything. I could have lost it, or someone could have taken it. Doc Brennan said you show no signs of violence, no bruises or wounds except for some scrapes that look like you fell. If someone had attacked you, there would be more evidence. Then where did I come from? Zara's voice rose with frustration. Who am I? Why can I not remember anything before waking up on that train? Preston reached over and took her hand, the gesture instinctive and comforting. It will come back, give it time. But weeks passed and Zara's memory remained locked away. Sheriff Garrett reported that none of the surrounding towns had any missing persons matching her description. Preston placed advertisements in newspapers from Santa Fe to Tucson, but no one came forward to claim her. It was as if Zara Vale had simply appeared out of nowhere, fully formed but entirely unknown. During those weeks, something grew between Preston and Zara that neither of them named but both felt. It was in the way Preston found excuses to be near the house during the day, the way Zara's face lit up when he came in from the range. It was in the long conversations on the porch, the shared laughter over meals, the comfortable silences that needed no filling. Maria watched it all with knowing eyes and kept her thoughts to herself, though sometimes Preston caught her smiling as she kneaded bread or stirred a pot on the stove. One afternoon in late June, nearly 2 months after Zara's arrival, Preston came back to the house earlier than usual to find her struggling with a stubborn pump handle at the well. She had been trying to water Maria's roses, but the mechanism had stuck. "Here, let me," Preston said, and together they worked the handle until water gushed forth. Zara laughed with delight, and some of the water splashed back on her, soaking the front of her dress. She gasped at the cold, then laughed harder, and Preston found himself laughing too. "You are drenched," he said, grabbing a cloth from the line to hand to her. "It feels wonderful," Zara said, still smiling. "It is so hot today." She dabbed at her face and neck, but the dress clung to her, and Preston tried not to notice the way it outlined her figure. He turned away, giving her privacy, but she reached out and touched his arm. "Preston," she said softly, Can I ask you something, of course? You think I will ever remember? Truly, he turned back to face her, saw the vulnerability in her eyes, the fear she tried to hide. I do not know, he admitted. But I know that whoever you were before, whoever Zara was or is, I am grateful she came here. I am grateful I met you. Color rose in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the heat. You have been so kind to me, you and Maria both. I do not know how I will ever repay you. I do not want repayment, Preston said. He reached up, hesitated, then gently brushed a wet strand of hair from her face. I just want you to be happy. Zara's breath caught, and for a moment they stood frozen, the air between them charged with possibility. Then Maria called from the house that supper was ready, and the moment broke. That night, Preston lay awake again, but this time not wondering about Zara's past. He was thinking about the future, about feelings he had not expected and did not quite know what to do with. He was falling in love with a woman who might be someone else, who might wake up tomorrow and remember a whole other life that did not include him. The next day, a stranger rode up to the ranch. He was a tall man with dark hair and expensive clothes, riding a fine horse that spoke of money. Preston was working in the barn when he heard the hoofbeats, and something made him grab his rifle before going out to meet the visitor. Help you? Preston asked, his tone neutral but wary. The man dismounted smoothly. I am looking for someone. A young woman, dark hair, green eyes. I was told in town that you might know her whereabouts. Preston's grip tightened on the rifle. Who is asking? My name is Robert Vale. I am looking for my sister. The world seemed to tilt. Preston stared at the man, searching his face for resemblance to Zara. There was something in the shape of the eyes, perhaps, the line of the jaw. Your sister, her name is Zara. She disappeared 3 months ago from Santa Fe. I have been searching for her ever since. Preston's mind raced. 3 months ago would have been April, before Zara arrived in Oro Grande. Wait here, he said, and went into the house. Zara was helping Maria prepare vegetables for canning. She looked up with a smile when Preston entered, a smile that faded when she saw his expression. What is wrong? There is a man outside. He says his name is Robert Vale and that he is your brother. All color drained from Zara's face. She swayed, and Preston rushed to steady her. A brother, she whispered. I have a brother, so he claims. Do you want to see him? Zara's hands trembled. I do not know. I do not remember. What if he is lying? What if this is some kind of trick? I will not let anyone hurt you, Preston promised. But if he truly is your brother, he might have answers. Zara nodded slowly and followed Preston outside, Maria coming along for support. The stranger turned when he heard them, and his face transformed with emotion. Zara. He started forward, then stopped when he saw Preston's rifle still in hand. Thank God, I have been so worried. Zara stared at him, her expression confused and frightened. I am sorry. I do not know you. Robert's face fell. You do not remember me. They said in town you had lost your memory, but I hoped seeing me might bring it back. He took a careful step closer. Zara, I am your brother. We grew up together in Philadelphia. Our parents died 5 years ago, and it has been just the two of us since then. Philadelphia, Zara repeated the word as if it were foreign. I do not remember Philadelphia. What is she doing here? Robert asked Preston, his tone sharp. What happened to her? Preston explained about finding Zara at the train station, about the weeks of searching for information. Robert listened, his expression growing darker. I know what happened, Robert said finally. Or at least I know part of it. Zara, you were engaged to be married. A man named Charles Whitmore from a wealthy Boston family. But a month before the wedding, you discovered he was not who he claimed to be. He had debts, serious ones, and he was marrying you for your inheritance from our parents. Zara pressed a hand to her head. I do not remember any of this. You confronted him, and there was a terrible argument. He threatened you, said you would marry him whether you wanted to or not. That night, you disappeared. I found a note saying you had to get away, that you were going west where he could not find you. But I heard nothing after that, until I got word that a woman matching your description had been found in Oro Grande with no memory. How did you hear? Preston asked, still suspicious. The advertisements you placed in the newspapers. I saw one in the Albuquerque paper 3 weeks ago. It took me this long to make my way here. Robert looked at his sister with anguish. Zara, I was so afraid he had hurt you. When you disappeared, when I could not find you, I thought the worst. Zara sank onto the porch steps, overwhelmed. I do not remember any of it. Not Charles, not the engagement, not running away. It is all just empty. Robert sat down beside her carefully, as if approaching a frightened animal. The doctors I consulted said sometimes the mind blocks out traumatic events. Maybe when you ran, when you were on that train fleeing from Charles, your mind just decided it had had enough. It locked everything away to protect you. Will it come back? Zara asked. I do not know. The doctors were not certain. Robert looked at Preston. I cannot thank you enough for taking care of her. If you will tell me what I owe you for her care, I will pay you right now. Preston stiffened. She is not a debt to be paid. I helped her because she needed help. Of course, Robert said quickly. I did not mean to offend. I only meant that I want to compensate you for your trouble. It was not trouble, Preston said flatly. An awkward silence fell. Maria broke it by inviting everyone inside for coffee. They sat around the kitchen table, and Robert told them more about Zara's life. She had been a teacher in Philadelphia, he said, working at a school for girls. She loved music and painting, could speak French and some Italian. Their parents had left them a modest fortune, enough that Zara had attracted attention from men like Charles Whitmore, who saw her as a solution to their financial problems. Zara listened to all of this, as if hearing about a stranger. Nothing Robert said sparked recognition in her eyes, no sudden rush of memory. She accepted that he was her brother because the evidence seemed to support it, but she felt no connection, no familial love. What will you do now? Preston asked, the question directed at both of them. Robert looked at Zara. I want you to come home with me, back to Philadelphia where you belong, where you will be safe. No, Zara said immediately, surprising everyone including herself. I cannot go to Philadelphia. I do not remember it. It would be like going to a foreign country. But it is your home, Robert protested. This is my home now, Zara said, looking around the kitchen at Maria, at Preston. These are the only people I know, the only place I remember. I cannot leave. Robert's jaw tightened. Zara, be reasonable. You cannot stay here forever imposing on strangers. I am not imposing, Zara said, her voice gaining strength. I help with the work. I earn my place. You are a teacher, not a rancher's maid, Robert said sharply. You have a life, a real life, waiting for you back east. I have a life here, Zara countered. Maybe it is not the life I had before, but it is the one I have now. Preston watched this exchange with his heart pounding. He wanted Zara to stay more than he wanted almost anything, but he also knew he could not let his own desires cloud what was best for her. Maybe you should take some time to think about it, he said quietly. Robert has come a long way. The least you can do is consider what he is saying. Zara looked at Preston, and he saw hurt in her eyes as if he had betrayed her. But he held her gaze steadily. This had to be her choice, truly her choice, not influenced by whatever she might feel for him. Robert stayed in town at the boarding house that night, and Zara was unusually quiet through supper. After Maria had gone to bed, Preston found Zara on the porch, staring out at the dark landscape. You think I should go with him, she said without preamble. Preston sat down in the chair beside her. I think you should do what you believe is right. That is not an answer. It is the only answer I can give you. Preston leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Zara, if you stay here, it should be because you want to stay, not because you have nowhere else to go. You have a brother who loves you, a home waiting for you, a life you built before all this happened. A life I do not remember. But it is still your life. Those people in Philadelphia, they knew you, they cared about you. Do you not owe it to them to try to reclaim that? Zara was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was small. I thought you wanted me to stay. I do, Preston said, the words torn from him. More than you know. But I will not trap you here with gratitude or obligation. If you stay, I want it to be because this is where you choose to be. Zara turned to look at him, and in the moonlight her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. Preston, I do not know who I was before, but I know who I am now. I am the woman who tends Maria's garden, who feeds the chickens every morning, who sits on this porch every evening and watches the sunset. I am the woman who feels more at home here, in this place I have known for only 2 months, than I can imagine feeling anywhere else. And I am the woman who has fallen in love with a stubborn cowboy who keeps trying to do the noble thing even when it breaks his heart. Preston's breath stopped. Zara, you cannot tell me to consider going back east when you know how I feel, when I think you feel the same way. What I feel does not matter if you are making decisions based on amnesia rather than truth. What if your memory comes back tomorrow and you remember you hate the West, hate ranching, hate everything about this life? And what if it never comes back? Zara countered. What if I spend the rest of my life waiting to remember, and in the meantime, I lose the chance for happiness that is right here in front of me? Preston stood abruptly and walked to the edge of the porch, his hands gripping the railing. Your brother will think I am keeping you here for improper reasons, that I am taking advantage of a woman who is vulnerable and confused. Then prove him wrong, Zara said. She stood and walked over to him, placing her hand over his on the railing. Marry me, Preston. Make this real, make this right. Not because you feel responsible for me, but because you love me the way I love you. Preston turned to look down at her, searching her face. You do not know what you are asking. Marriage is forever. What if you wake up one day and regret it? I could wake up any day and regret not taking this chance, Zara said. Life does not come with guarantees, Preston. I may not remember my past, but I know what I feel now. I know that when I am with you, I feel safe and happy and like I finally belong somewhere. Is that not enough? Preston cupped her face in his calloused hands. You are sure? I have never been more sure of anything. He kissed her then, soft and careful, as if she were something precious that might break. Zara kissed him back, her arms going around his neck, and for that moment, nothing else existed but the two of them and the love they had found in the most unexpected of circumstances. The next morning they told Robert. As Preston had predicted, he was not pleased. You are taking advantage of her, Robert said angrily, facing Preston in the yard. She is confused, vulnerable. She does not know what she wants. I know exactly what I want, Zara said firmly, standing beside Preston. I am sorry if this is not what you hoped for, Robert, but this is my decision. You have known him for 2 months, and I have known you for less than a day, at least as far as my memory is concerned. You may be my brother, but you are a stranger to me. Preston is not. Robert shook his head in frustration. If you insist on staying in New Mexico, at least take time, get to know each other properly. Wait until your memory returns. What if it never returns? Zara asked. How long should I wait? A year, 5 years, a lifetime? What is the rush? Robert demanded. Zara looked at Preston, then back at her brother. The rush is that I have already lost months of my life to emptiness. I do not want to lose any more. I want to start living again, building new memories even if I cannot recover the old ones." Robert was silent, clearly struggling. Finally, he said, "If you marry him, you will be giving up your inheritance. The terms of our parents will specify that your share would come to you upon marriage, but only if I approved of the match." "I do not care about the money," Zara said. "You might care later. That money could give you security, independence." "Preston gives me security," Zara said, "and the work I do here gives me independence. I do not need money to have those things." Robert looked at Preston. "You are very quiet. You have nothing to say in your defense." "Only that I love your sister," Preston said, "and that I will spend the rest of my life trying to make her happy. I cannot give her back her memory, and I cannot offer her the sophisticated life she apparently had in Philadelphia. But I can give her a home, a family, and a love that is real and true. If that is not enough, then she should go with you." Robert studied Preston for a long moment. Whatever he saw must have satisfied something in him, because his shoulders sagged. "I can see I am not going to change either of your minds. Very well. If this is what you truly want, Zara, I will not stand in your way, but I want to stay for the wedding. I want to see for myself that you are happy." Relief flooded through Zara. "Thank you, Robert. That means more to me than you know." They were married a week later in the small church in Oro Grande, with half the town in attendance. Maria wept happy tears and insisted on making Zara's dress herself, a beautiful creation of white cotton with lace at the collar and cuffs. Robert gave his sister away with good grace, and Preston thought he saw genuine warmth in the other man's eyes as he placed Zara's hand in Preston's. Sheriff Garrett and Doc Brennan stood as witnesses, and the preacher, an earnest young man named Reverend Matthews, performed the ceremony with heartfelt sincerity. When Preston kissed his bride, the church erupted in applause. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up under the cottonwood trees and food enough to feed everyone twice over. Maria had outdone herself with the cooking, aided by several women from town who had taken Zara to their hearts over the past months. There was music and dancing, laughter and joy. Robert pulled Preston aside as the sun began to set. "Take care of her," he said quietly. "She may not remember who she was, but I do. She is strong and smart and deserves to be happy." "I will do everything in my power to make sure she is," Preston promised. "I can see that," Robert said. He glanced over at Zara, who was laughing at something Maria had said. "I admit, when I first came here, I thought you were some opportunist taking advantage of my sister's misfortune. But I was wrong. You love her genuinely and she loves you. That is more than she had with Charles Whitmore." "Will you tell him you found her?" Preston asked. "No," Robert said firmly. "As far as Charles is concerned, Zara disappeared and was never found. He does not deserve to know where she is or that she is happy. He will have to solve his financial problems some other way." Robert left the next day, making Zara promise to write to him regularly. She cried when he rode away, mourning the connection she could not feel but knew should be there. Preston held her as she wept, understanding that she was grieving not just for the brother she could not remember but for the entire life that had been stolen from her. "I am sorry," she said when the tears had passed. "This should be a happy time." "You are allowed to feel sad," Preston said. "Marrying me does not mean you have to pretend everything is perfect." "It is as close to perfect as I can imagine," Zara said, managing a smile. "I just wish I could remember him, remember our parents, remember any of it. But the memories did not come." The months passed, summer turning to fall, and Zara remained as blank about her past as she had been that day on the train platform. She and Preston settled into married life with an ease that surprised them both. They worked side by side on the ranch, Preston teaching her to ride and Zara proving to be a natural in the saddle. She learned to rope and brand, to read the weather and the land, to anticipate what needed doing before being asked. The ranch hands, initially skeptical of the boss's new wife, came to respect her. She was not afraid of hard work, and she treated everyone with kindness and fairness. When one of the younger hands, a boy named Tommy, broke his arm, Zara sat with him while Doc Brennan set the bone, holding his other hand and telling him stories to distract from the pain. Preston watched her bloom like the flower he had named her for, watched her confidence grow and her smiles come more easily. At night, she lay in his arms in the big bed they now shared, and they talked about everything and nothing. She told him about her hopes for the future, about wanting to start a school in Oro Grande for the children who had none. He told her about his dreams of expanding the ranch, of breeding better horses, of building something that would last beyond his lifetime. "We could build it together," Zara said one night in early November, her head resting on his chest. "Your dreams and mine. A ranch that also supports education, that gives back to the community." "You have been thinking about this," Preston said, amused. "I have. There are at least 15 children in and around Oro Grande who have no schooling. Their parents are too busy with work, or they cannot afford to send them away to school. If we could start something here, even just a few hours a day, it would make a difference." "Where would you hold this school?" Preston asked. "I thought perhaps we could build a small schoolhouse on the edge of town. Nothing fancy, just a room with desks and a blackboard. I could teach reading and arithmetic, maybe some history and geography." Preston was quiet for a moment. "It would take money." "We have some savings," Zara said carefully. "And I thought perhaps we could ask the other ranchers and business owners in town to contribute. If their children benefit, they should be willing to help." "You have it all planned out," Preston observed. "I've had a lot of time to think." "Is it a foolish idea?" Preston tightened his arms around her. "It is a wonderful idea, and if it is what you want, we will make it happen." By spring, the schoolhouse was built, a neat structure with whitewashed walls and glass windows that let in the light. Zara had 15 students on the first day, ranging in age from 6 to 14. She taught them with patience and enthusiasm, and word spread that the new school in Oro Grande was something special. Preston often rode into town during the school day just to watch through the window. He saw Zara at the blackboard, explaining a mathematics problem or reading from a book, and his heart swelled with pride. This was who she had been before the train, he realized. A teacher, someone who loved learning and sharing knowledge. Even without her memories, that core part of herself had remained. In June, a year after their wedding, Zara told Preston she was pregnant. He whooped with joy and swung her around until she laughed and begged to be put down. "I was afraid," she admitted later, sitting with him on the porch as the sun set. "Afraid that I would not be a good mother because I cannot remember my own mother." "You will be wonderful," Preston said with certainty. "You have so much love to give, Zara. That child will be lucky to have you." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Zara had to give up teaching in her final months. One of the mothers from town took over the school temporarily, following the lesson plans Zara had carefully written out. Preston hovered anxiously, making sure Zara did not overexert herself, until she finally had to tell him firmly that she was pregnant, not made of glass. Their son was born on a cold February morning in 1886, delivered by Doc Brennan with Maria assisting. Preston paced outside the bedroom door until he heard the baby's cry, then rushed in to find Zara exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle. "We have a son," she said wonderingly. They named him Thomas Preston Ashford, Tommy for short, and he became the center of their world. Preston marveled at the tiny fingers and toes, the way the baby gripped his finger with surprising strength. Zara nursed him with natural grace, singing lullabies in a sweet voice that Preston had not heard before. "You think I sang to students?" Zara asked one night as she rocked Tommy to sleep. "Back in Philadelphia, maybe," Preston said. "Or maybe you sang to your brother when he was small." "I wish I could remember," Zara said, but there was less pain in the statement than there once had been. The amnesia had become a fact of her life, something she had learned to accept if not fully make peace with. When Tommy was 6 months old, a letter arrived from Robert. He had married, he wrote, to a woman named Catherine who worked as a nurse in Philadelphia. They were expecting their first child in the winter. He included a daguerreotype of himself and his bride, and Zara studied it carefully, trying to find some flicker of recognition in her brother's face. There was none, but she was happy for him nonetheless. She wrote back with news of Tommy, including a photograph that Preston had paid a traveling photographer to take. The correspondence continued over the years, letters crossing the miles between Pennsylvania and New Mexico, maintaining a connection that Zara could not feel in her heart, but honored nonetheless. Tommy grew into a bright, energetic boy with his father's blue eyes and his mother's dark hair. Zara returned to teaching when he was 2, bringing him with her to the schoolhouse where he played with blocks in the corner while she taught the older children. By the time he was 4, he was sitting in on lessons, learning to read years before most children. The ranch prospered under Preston's management. He expanded carefully, never overreaching, building the legacy he had dreamed of. He brought in better breeding stock for both cattle and horses, and the Ashford Ranch became known throughout the territory for quality animals. The ranch hands were loyal, well paid and treated fairly, and several of them had been with Preston for over a decade. Life was good, better than Preston had ever imagined it could be during those lonely years before Zara arrived. He had a wife he loved deeply, a son who filled him with pride, work that mattered, and a place in the community. If someone had told him 10 years earlier that a woman with no memory would step off a train and change his entire world, he would have thought them mad. When Tommy was 5, Zara gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Rose Maria Ashford after the flowers Zara loved, and the woman who had become like a mother to her. Rose had Zara's green eyes and a temperament as sunny as her name suggested. Tommy adored his baby sister, and Preston often found him singing to her or telling her stories the way Zara did. The schoolhouse had to be expanded as more families moved to the area, drawn by the railroad and the promise of land. Zara hired a second teacher, a young woman named Sarah Bennett, who had come from back east with her family. Together, they taught nearly 30 students, and there was talk of building a proper school building in town. On their 10th anniversary, Preston took Zara on a trip to Santa Fe. It was the first time she had been back to the city since the train had carried her away from it, though she did not remember that journey. They stayed in a fine hotel, ate in restaurants, and walked through the plaza in the evening. Preston bought her a necklace with a small emerald that matched her eyes, and she wore it with pride. "Do you ever regret it?" Preston asked one night as they lay together in the hotel bed. "Staying here, marrying me, giving up the life you might have had?" Zara turned to look at him in the dim light. "I regret nothing. This life with you and Tommy and Rose, this is everything I want. I may not remember who I was before, but I know who I am now. I am your wife, our children's mother, a teacher, a member of this community. That is enough. More than enough." "I love you," Preston said, the words still carrying weight even after 10 years of saying them. "And I love you," Zara replied, "more than I can express." They made love slowly, tenderly, with the ease of long familiarity and the passion that had never dimmed between them. Afterward, Zara fell asleep in Preston's arms, and he lay awake thinking about the strange turns life took, the unexpected blessings that came from tragedy. The years continued to roll by with the steady rhythm of ranch life. Tommy grew tall and strong, taking after his father in build and temperament. He loved the ranch and everything about it, spending every free moment with the horses or riding the range with Preston and the hands. Rose was more like her mother, preferring books and learning to the physical work of ranching, though she could ride as well as her brother when she chose. In 1895, when Tommy was 9 and Rose was 4, Zara became pregnant again. This pregnancy was harder than the previous two, and Doc Brennan, now in his 70s but still practicing, ordered her to rest. Preston hired extra help, so Maria could focus on taking care of Zara, and he worried constantly, haunted by the knowledge that childbirth could still be dangerous despite medical advances. Their third child, another son, was born in November. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Preston feared he might lose Zara. But she fought through with the same determination she brought to everything, and finally their son arrived, small but healthy, with lungs that proved he had plenty of fight in him. They named him Robert Preston Ashford, after Zara's brother who had never stopped writing, never stopped being part of their lives even from a distance. When they sent word to the real Robert, his response was touched and grateful, saying it honored him more than they knew. With 3 children, life at the ranch became busier but also richer. The house rang with laughter and occasional tears, with the chaos of childhood and the deep contentment of family. Preston taught Tommy and eventually Rose to ride and rope, to understand the rhythms of the land and the animals. Zara taught all 3 children to read and write, to think and question, to see learning as a joy rather than a chore. Maria, now in her 70s, slowed down but refused to retire. She doted on the children, telling them stories of the old days, teaching them Spanish, making sure they understood their connection to the land and its history. She had become grandmother to them in truth if not in blood, and they loved her fiercely. On a hot day in August 1898, when Tommy was 12 and already working alongside the hands during summer, a woman came to the ranch. She was older, perhaps 60, well-dressed and traveling in a private carriage. Preston met her in the yard, curious about this unexpected visitor. "I am looking for Zara Vale," the woman said. "Or I suppose she may go by a different name now. I heard she was here." Preston's entire body tensed. "Who is asking? My name is Margaret Whitmore. I believe Zara was once engaged to my son, Charles." Preston's hand moved instinctively toward his gun belt before he stopped himself. "That was a long time ago. 13 years, Margaret agreed. "I know, but I would like to speak with her if possible. I have traveled a long way." Preston studied her, trying to determine if this was a threat. "Why now? After all this time?" Margaret's face showed weariness and sorrow. "Because my son is dead. He died 3 months ago, and in going through his effects, I found things that made me realize I never knew the full story of what happened between him and Zara. I wanted to find her, to apologize if nothing else." Preston was quiet for a moment, thinking. Finally he said, "Wait here." He went into the house, where Zara was helping Maria prepare vegetables for canning while keeping an eye on Rose and young Robert playing on the floor. "There is someone here to see you," Preston said carefully. "A woman named Margaret Whitmore." Zara's knife stilled. "Whitmore. That was the name Robert said, was it not? The man I was supposed to marry, his mother apparently. She says he is dead and she wants to apologize." Zara set down the knife and wiped her hands on her apron. I will see her." They went outside together, and Margaret stood when she saw Zara approach, her eyes filled with tears. "You look so well," Margaret said. "So happy, I am glad." "You said you wanted to apologize," Zara said, her voice neutral. "For what?" Margaret glanced at Preston, then back at Zara. "May we speak privately? Anything you have to say to me, you can say in front of my husband." Margaret nodded, accepting this. "Very well. After Charles died, I was going through his papers and I found letters. Letters he had written but never sent, journals where he detailed his plans. He was going to marry you for your money, Zara. I knew he had debts, but I did not know the extent of them, or that he had targeted you specifically because of your inheritance." "I know," Zara said. "My brother told me. I do not remember any of it, but he told me what happened." "You do not remember?" Margaret looked confused. Zara explained about her amnesia, about arriving in Oro Grande with no memory of her past. Margaret listened with growing horror. "Oh, my dear, I had no idea. Charles mentioned in his journals that you had disappeared, that he searched for you for months. I thought perhaps you had simply run away, made a new life somewhere. I never imagined you had lost your memory." "It does not matter now," Zara said. "That life is gone. I have a new one here, a good one." "I can see that," Margaret said, glancing at the house where children's laughter could be heard. "I am truly sorry for what my son tried to do to you. If I had known, I would have stopped him. He was not always a bad man, but his father's death left us in difficult circumstances, and Charles made poor choices trying to resolve them." "I appreciate you coming all this way to tell me this," Zara said, "but I hold no anger toward you or your son. I cannot hold feelings about things I do not remember, and even if I could, I would have gratitude rather than anger. If he had not threatened me, if I had not run, I would never have ended up here. I would never have met Preston, never had my children, never built this life. In a strange way, your son gave me the greatest gift I could have asked for." Margaret smiled through her tears. "You are very gracious, more gracious than I deserve. I will go now and leave you in peace. I just needed to see for myself that you were well, and to tell you that Charles regretted his actions. It may not matter to you, but he wrote in his final journal entry that he wished he had been a better man, the man you deserved." After Margaret left, Zara stood in the yard for a long moment, Preston beside her. "That was my past," she said finally. "A man who wanted to use me, who drove me away. And because of that, I found you. Life is strange, is it not?" "The strangest," Preston agreed. He pulled her close. "Are you all right?" "I am more than all right. I am exactly where I am supposed to be." The years continued their march forward. Tommy grew into a fine young man, taking on more responsibility at the ranch until he was essentially Preston's partner in running the operation. He was 21 when he married a girl named Emma from a neighboring ranch, and Preston turned over a portion of land to them to build their own house and start their own family. Rose, at 16, showed no interest in ranching but had inherited her mother's love of teaching. She went to Santa Fe to attend the teacher's college there, writing letters home every week that Zara read aloud to the family. Young Robert, 14, was still finding his way, showing talent in both ranching and academics, trying to decide which path he wanted to follow. Preston was 59 now, his hair silver but his body still strong from years of physical work. Zara was 48, her dark hair showing threads of gray but her eyes as green and bright as the day he had first seen her. They had been married for 24 years, and Preston loved her more with each passing day. On a cool evening in October 1909, they sat on the porch together as they had countless times before, watching the sunset paint the sky. This was their ritual, their sacred time together at the end of each day. "You know what I was thinking about today?" Zara asked, her hand in Preston's. Tell me. I was thinking about that day I arrived at the train station, how terrified I was, how lost. I was standing there with nothing, no name, no past, no future I could see. And then I offered you a ride to the ranch, Preston said, smiling at the memory. And you gave me a name, Zara. You gave me an identity when I had none. You made that name your own. You became Zara Vale, then Zara Ashford. You made it mean something. We made it mean something, Zara corrected. Together. Do you remember what you said about why you chose that name? I said it meant blooming flower. You said it seemed fitting for someone starting fresh. And I have bloomed, have I not? Here in this place with you, I have grown into someone I could never have imagined. I have had a life full of love and purpose and joy. Even without my memories, even without knowing who I was before, I have had a life that matters. Preston raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. You have given me everything I ever wanted and things I did not even know I needed. You are my heart, Zara. You always will be. And you are mine, she said softly. My cowboy who gave me a name and a home, who gave me himself. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun sank below the horizon and the stars began to emerge. Somewhere in the house, Robert was playing the piano Preston had bought for Rose years ago. Tommy and Emma were likely at their own home, putting their 2-year-old son to bed. Rose would be in Santa Fe, preparing lessons for her students. Maria was in the kitchen, humming as she always did while she worked. This was their life, built from nothing, from a woman with no memory and a lonely cowboy willing to take a chance. It had not been the life either of them expected, but it was the life they had chosen, day after day, year after year. And it was beautiful. When Tommy and Emma's second child was born the following spring, a daughter they named Zara after her grandmother, Preston held the baby and marveled at the continuation of their story. This child would grow up hearing about how her grandmother arrived with no memory but built a life anyway. She would grow up on this ranch that Preston had carved from nothing, learning from a family that valued both hard work and education, strength and compassion. Robert chose to go to university back east, wanting to study law. It was hard to let him go, but Preston and Zara were proud of his ambition. Rose finished her teaching degree and took a position at a school in Albuquerque, close enough to visit regularly but far enough to build her own life. Tommy and Emma took on more of the ranch operations as Preston gradually stepped back, ready to enjoy his grandchildren and the fruits of his labor. On their 30th anniversary in 1915, Preston and Zara renewed their vows in the same church where they had married. Their children and grandchildren surrounded them, along with friends from throughout the territory who had become like family over the decades. Sheriff Garrett had long since retired, replaced by a younger man, but he came to the ceremony in a wheelchair, determined to see his friends celebrate their love. Doc Brennan had passed away 5 years earlier, but his son, also a doctor, attended in his stead. Maria, now 90 and frail but still sharp as ever, sat in the front row and wept openly. I promise to love you all the days of my life, Preston said, looking into Zara's eyes as they stood before Reverend Matthew's successor. To honor you, cherish you, and stand beside you through whatever may come. You saved me from loneliness, Zara. You gave meaning to everything I had built. You are my partner, my love, my home. I promise to love you with everything I am, Zara said, her voice strong despite the tears streaming down her face. You gave me life when I had none. You gave me a name, a home, a family. You taught me that the past does not matter as much as the present, that love is built in the small moments of every day. You are my foundation, Preston, my rock, my heart, my everything. When they kissed, the church erupted in applause and cheers. This was not the careful, nervous kiss of young newlyweds, but the deep, certain kiss of two people who had built a lifetime together, who had weathered storms and celebrated joys, who knew each other's souls. The reception at the ranch lasted until well after dark. There was music and dancing, food and laughter. Preston danced with Zara, with Rose, with his granddaughter also named Zara. He shook hands with what felt like half of New Mexico, accepting congratulations and good wishes. Late in the evening, when most guests had departed and only family remained, Preston stood with Zara at the edge of the circle of light from the lanterns, looking out at his land. "You remember what I said that first night?" Zara asked. "After Robert came and told me about my past. You said you were the woman who had fallen in love with a stubborn cowboy," Preston recalled. "I said you kept trying to do the noble thing even when it broke your heart. You wanted me to consider going back east because you thought it was what was best for me." "I was an idiot," Preston said flatly. Zara laughed, the sound bright and joyful. "You were noble, but I am glad I convinced you otherwise. I am glad I stayed. So am I. Every single day I am grateful you chose this life, chose me." "It was the easiest choice I ever made," Zara said. "Even not knowing my past, I knew my future was with you." They stood together in the darkness, Preston's arm around Zara's shoulders, her head resting against his chest. Around them, their family laughed and talked, their legacy alive and thriving. The ranch stretched out beyond them, dark shapes against the star-filled sky, acres they had worked and loved and built together. Preston thought about that day 30 years ago when a frightened woman had stepped off a train with nothing but the clothes on her back and empty memories. He thought about the leap of faith he had taken in offering her help, not knowing it would change his entire life. He thought about all the moments between then and now, the joys and sorrows, the ordinary days and the extraordinary ones. "I love you, Zara Ashford," he said into the darkness. "And I love you, Preston Ashford," she replied. "Forever and always." Maria passed away peacefully in her sleep 2 years later, surrounded by the family she had helped to build. They buried her in the cemetery in Oro Grande, her grave marked with a headstone that read Maria Gonzalez, beloved friend and family. Zara planted roses around the grave, tending them faithfully every week, making sure Maria's resting place was always beautiful. The loss hit them hard, but life continued as it always did. More grandchildren were born, Tommy and Emma eventually having 5 in total. Rose married a teacher from Albuquerque, a gentle man named David who loved her fierce independence. Robert returned from university with a law degree and opened a practice in Santa Fe, building a reputation as a fair and honest attorney. Preston and Zara grew old together, their bodies slowing but their love never diminishing. They still sat on the porch every evening, watching the sunset, holding hands as they had for decades. They still talked about everything and nothing, still laughed together, still found joy in each other's company. Zara's memory never returned. The past before that train remained locked away, inaccessible despite occasional flashes that might have been memories or might have been dreams. But it ceased to matter. The life she had built was so full, so rich, that the lost years faded in significance. She was Zara Ashford, teacher and rancher's wife, mother and grandmother, beloved member of the Oro Grande community. That was enough. That was everything. On a warm spring morning in 1925, 50 years after Zara had arrived in New Mexico, Preston and Zara sat on their porch watching their great-grandchildren play in the yard. Preston was 84 now, Zara 73. Their bodies were frail, but their minds remained sharp, and their love as strong as ever. "Can you believe it has been 50 years?" Zara asked, her hand, now spotted with age and marked by arthritis, still fitting perfectly into Preston's. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday," Preston said. "Sometimes it feels like you have always been here, like I cannot remember a time without you." "I cannot remember a time before you at all," Zara said with a smile. Literally. They still joked about it, the amnesia that had brought them together. It had ceased to be a tragedy and become simply part of their story, the unusual beginning to an extraordinary love. "You have any regrets?" Preston asked, a question he had asked many times over the years. "Not a single one," Zara replied, the same answer she always gave. "You gave me everything, Preston. A name, a home, a family, a life full of love and meaning. What more could anyone want?" "I am the one who received everything," Preston countered. "You were the gift I never expected, the answer to prayers I had not known to pray." They sat in silence, watching the children play, watching Tommy walk across the yard with one of his own sons, now grown and working the ranch alongside him. 3 generations of Ashfords, all because Preston had offered a ride to a frightened woman at a train station. Preston died peacefully in his sleep 6 months later, Zara beside him as she had been for 50 years. The funeral was attended by hundreds, people from all over New Mexico who had known Preston as a fair employer, a good neighbor, a man of integrity. They laid him to rest in the cemetery in Oro Grande, and Zara planted roses around his grave as she had done for Maria years before. Zara lived for 2 more years, spending her days with her family and tending her garden. She grew frailer, her body wearing out, but her spirit remained strong. She told stories to her great-grandchildren about their great-grandfather, about the man who had given her a name and a home, who had loved her without reservation or hesitation. On a cool evening in October 1927, as the sun set over the New Mexico landscape she had loved for more than 50 years, Zara Vale Ashford passed away surrounded by her children and grandchildren. Her last words were, "Tell Preston I am coming home." They buried her beside Preston, their graves marked with matching headstones. Beneath their names and dates, they had inscribed the words Zara had spoken on their 30th anniversary. Love built in the small moments of every day. The ranch continued, passed down through Tommy to his children and eventually his grandchildren. The school Zara had started grew into a proper institution, educating generations of children in Oro Grande and beyond. Rose's own children became teachers, carrying on their grandmother's legacy of education and service. The story of how Zara arrived with no memory, and how Preston gave her a name, and a home became legend in the family, told and retold to each new generation. It was a reminder that love could be found in the most unexpected places, that family was built not just on blood but on choice and commitment, that a life could be made beautiful even when it started from nothing. Years later, when the little girl named after Zara grew up and had children of her own, she would stand at her great-grandparents' graves and tell their story. She would explain how sometimes the greatest blessings came from the hardest circumstances, how love could heal even the deepest wounds, how 2 strangers could become soulmates through patience and faith, and the simple decision to choose each other every day. The roses Zara had planted bloomed every spring, bright spots of color in the cemetery, tended by family members who made sure they were never neglected. It was a symbol of the love that had started on a train platform and grown into something that touched hundreds of lives across multiple generations. In the end, Zara Vale Ashford had arrived with no memory at all, and Preston Ashford had given her a name and a home. But what they had built together was so much more than that. They had built a love story for the ages, a testament to the power of compassion, faith, and the willingness to take a chance on love even when nothing was certain. They had built a family, a legacy, and a love that lasted not just until death but beyond it, living on in the hearts and memories of all those who came after them. The cowboy and the woman from the train had found each other against all odds, and in doing so, they had created something beautiful and lasting. Their love had been a gift, one they had unwrapped slowly over 50 years together, and it was a gift they passed on to their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, teaching them that love was always worth the risk, always worth the leap of faith, always worth everything you could give it. And on quiet evenings in Oro Grande, when the sun set over the New Mexico landscape and painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, people said you could still feel their presence, still sense the love that had built the Ashford legacy. The cowboy who had given a name and the woman who had accepted it, together forever in the land they had loved and the family they had built. Their story a reminder that sometimes the greatest adventures begin with a single act of kindness and a willingness to believe in love at first sight.